Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another Spooktober edition of the Seaman Cinema Sitdown. That's right, man. We got all the way caught up. We're back in the regular flow, and we got a brand new movie that is a perfect film to watch following the movie that we just watched, which was Halloween 2. You want to see all my Spooktober thoughts on Halloween 2, you can check them out right up there, but that's not what we're here to talk about. However, I do think there are quite a few homages to Halloween 2 in this sequel, and one of the things that I dug that David Gordon Green and Danny McBride, as well as Jeff Fradley on the first movie, and now Scott Teems this time around, but something that I think they've done well in both movies is kind of capturing the essence of the first Halloween for their first Halloween and the second Halloween for their second Halloween. There's some cool stuff in here. And this movie certainly, I think, got better for me the second time around, which is always wonderful. So let's not waste any more time. And why don't you pull up a chair, take a seat. We're getting ready to dive in spoiler-free into Halloween Kills. And I'm not gonna lie to you, this is not a perfect Halloween movie, but I do think it is a very rock-solid entry into the Halloween canon. And look, I understand that there are going to be some people who are just not really about this new version of Halloween because it cuts everything after the original Halloween off, right? Like, the canon now is 1978 Halloween, 2018 Halloween, Halloween Kills, and then Halloween Ends will wrap the story. From what we understand, although who knows, man, if they're making tons and tons of money, maybe it's left a little bit more open-ended than we can always see. I mean, we're always going to see Michael Myers come back to the screen in some way or another, but having something that is directly attached to John Carpenter, who, again, you know, is involved in the score, he's involved from a producing standpoint, and it's one of the things that, for me, I'm cool with what they're doing. Like, I understand that losing Laurie as the sister to Michael Myers rubs some Halloween fans the wrong way. But I genuinely thought, after watching the last Halloween movie, that Laurie Strode, 40 years removed from that original incident, and heck, even if you couldn't keep Halloween 2 because they kill Michael. So, like, I mean, granted, they brought him back, but, like, again, like you'd be right back in the stuff that made the first run kind of weird. Like, that ending to Halloween 2 created issues for the franchise that it kind of combated all the way afterward. So to have a clean slate, you kind of have to remove that. And this concept of, you know, Michael going to prison and Laurie 40 years later, I thought it worked. You know, I thought it felt like Laurie Strode having recovered from being attacked in that way as a teenager, right? Like, that PTSD created a woman that I thought was in line, you know, and I thought Curtis did a wonderful job with it. And I think that David Gordon Green does a really, really good job of mimicking Halloween 2 in the sense that in the Halloween canon, 2 picks up exactly where 1 leaves off, and that's exactly what he does here. And this movie looks, it feels, I mean, granted, it's coming from 2 of the 3 writers and the same director, so the cohesiveness between these 2 movies is very strong, and much like the original Halloweens, you can very easily watch those back to back, and it feels like one cohesive story. Now, like I said, I don't think this is a perfect Halloween movie, and I appreciate lots of the things that we do conceptually this time around. On the first watch, I've watched it twice, but on my first watch, the second act was a little wonky, and it has to kind of do with some of the focus, and the focus is a little disjointed throughout the movie because this time around, again, very similar to Halloween 2, Laurie Strode is in the hospital because she was injured by Michael Myers in the last Halloween. And because of that, you kind of have to shift focus. Now, in the original Halloween 2, you followed Loomis a lot more. This time, and something that I dig conceptually, is that we follow the town a lot, and we get to see how the town responds to Michael coming back 40 years later. And I dug that conceptually, but on my first go through the movie, the second act got a little wonky, specifically the hospital sequence, which, granted, I also appreciate because Halloween 2 almost exclusively takes place in the hospital. But they do some different stuff there, but again, that was where, like, on the second time through, I had just rewatched Halloween 2, I started appreciating things in this movie a lot more. And I dig, like I said, that we get to see what Haddonfield's response is to Michael while Laurie is, you know, laying up. Now, the one thing I was hoping for that we didn't get a ton of was maybe more for Andi Matichak or even Judy Greer or both. I would have gladly taken lots of Karen and Allyson in this movie with Laurie in the hospital. And that's one of the things I think the movie does struggle with is like, look, if you're coming here to see Michael Myers like F some stuff up, you are gonna be so freaking happy with this movie. Every time Michael Myers is on screen, he absolutely crushes. He is once again terrifying. He is brutal. The gore, much like Halloween 2, is dialed up from the previous one. And granted, while he is terrifying, I was never scared at all during the movie. The movie didn't get me to jump. I was just in on anything that he was doing because he's so captivating. But the opposite of him, it's so many different people in this one. And I think you could have cleaned that up a little bit in the second act. But on the overall, I appreciate what they do, and I enjoy a lot of the townspeople that we get to interact with. There are some folks that are brought back from the original Halloween. There are 2 actors that are, and 4 characters, which I thought was really, really cool. And Gordon Green and McBride and teams deserve some major credit for something they do early in the movie. There is a stretch where they kind of like you need for the original Halloween story to flow real well with this one. There are a couple gaps that we kind of needed filled in, and they do a really, really cool job of doing it. And what Gordon Green does behind the camera through that sequence is, oh, it's so good. Like, for me, the first act and the third act of this movie were fire. And, like, I was digging everything they were doing. It's the second act where you get a little muddled. But overall, like, what you come out of that first act, I dig the people that we get to meet and the people that we get to hang out with, and I dig how that's tied to what Gordon Green does there. I also really thoroughly enjoyed the 2 people who have moved into the Myers house all these years later. There's 2 characters. They go by Big and Little John. Phenomenal stuff. Like, the little kid that's being babysat in the first one, like, he was my MVP. These guys aren't there, but inside the context of this movie, like, that would be my reference point, where it's like, I just so enjoyed when these guys were on screen, specifically Big John. He was fantastic. So I did enjoy my time with the town and getting to see that response, but I do think that there is always a little bit of a disconnect when there is a disconnect between Michael and Laurie, and Laurie is a little bit more disjointed this time around. You know, that first one I thought her story was very focused. You know, you could latch onto it, and that build of Michael getting to her and the 2 of them showing down, it was everything that you were hoping for in that movie. So that's missing a little bit here. But Curtis still puts in, like, a phenomenal performance. Like, she gets a moment with Will Patton where, and I love, too, that they do, like, there's, this moment ties back to something that Will Patton talks about earlier in the movie, and there's a slight change in the way that it's talked about, but I like the way that the scenes mimic each other, and Curtis and Patton both in this scene while they're in the hospital, it's so good. Like, you're just watching 2 people, like, act their ass off, and while Curtis doesn't have a ton there, you know, where she's sprinkled in throughout the movie, I think she always delivers. And the back end of this movie, like the third act, that was where everything, like, was really hitting for me, and that's where that scene takes place with Curtis. That's, I think, where you get some of the best stuff for her, and I think you're able to set up the 2 people that I wanted to get more from in this one to have all of it in the last one, and that's Laurie Strode and her granddaughter Allyson. Andi Matichak is also sprinkled throughout this movie, and when we get her, I think she's very solid on screen. I think she really holds herself well, and I think she embodies the Laurie Strode that we all originally grew up with, right? Like, how Jamie Lee Curtis evolved that character in the original canon. I feel that version of the character that we get back then is what we're seeing being built with Matichak. And that's kind of a cool meshing because it allows Curtis to do something different and allows Matichak to kind of fill that void a little bit of that classic vibe of Laurie that, you know, I think some people miss. And I was hoping to get more of that in this. And much like Strode, she's kind of sprinkled more in here. And again, very, very strong in the back end, like where her character goes and what her character goes through. I really, really liked it. And like I said, I kind of felt this, wow, all right, you know what? I was lacking in this department in this movie a little bit, but I think you're going to make up for it in ends. And I certainly hope that. Now, one of the other big standouts, though, in this movie, who gets a little bit more screen time, I feel like, more than both of them, is Judy Greer. And she crushes, right? Because she has direct connections to the people in town that we're interacting with. And with Laurie being in the hospital, she kind of is able to interact outside of the hospital with some of them, as well as inside the hospital. And once again, Judy Greer gets one sequence that's absolutely phenomenal. You know, the first Halloween movie, like the end, boom, knocked it out of the park. And there is a sequence for her in the hospital that she just crushes. And I really liked almost everything that they do with her character. There's something that's a little muddled toward the end of the movie. That was like, I'm not entirely sure what just happened. But overall, I think Greer really, really delivers. And everybody that I think shows up, you know, from, I don't want to spoil who's in the town, you know, if you haven't been paying attention to, you know, trailers or anything like that. But the townspeople that we interact with, I think they all bring it. And like I said, conceptually, I like the idea of getting to spend time with the town. I felt we spent maybe a little too much time with them in the second act. But, you know, it functions really well. And what it leads to by the end of the movie allows David Gordon Green to do some really cool things with the camera. He doesn't have one particular scene or sequence that's as strong as that one shot take that he takes us through in the last movie, but there's a couple times where just imagery wise, what he is putting on the camera, absolutely stunning. And of course, front and center to most of that is this guy. And again, you know, you can't give enough credit to Michael Myers, who's played once again by James Jude Courtney, Nick Castle. And like I said, while this one isn't perfect, I think it really does serve well as potentially the middle movie to you know, this overall arc. Like, it's one of these movies that I enjoyed, right? Like, I definitely liked it way better. I thought it played a lot smoother the second time through. But it feels like the way people will ultimately land on this movie has a lot to do with what happens in Ends. If Ends pays off on some of the stuff that you're hoping to get in 2 and allows 2 to kind of set that stuff up, then 2, you know, I think will be looked at more fondly. If it doesn't, and somehow that is a miss, then you're going to look at like, well, the first one was real good, the second 2 kind of fell off. But I think this is a solid entry. And once again, the score is phenomenal. Anytime John Carpenter is involved in what's going on with the score, as well as his son, who was involved with the last Halloween movie as well, there's always just going to be magic there. And I just love how, you know, they're able to bring you that classic, you know, what you need from that score, but mix in, you know, throughout the movie, stuff that really works and elevates what Michael is doing on screen. And I can't stress enough, this is an R-rated movie for a reason, because this is very, very gory. And huge props to the visual effects makeup artists. Holy cow, man. I saw some stuff in this movie that I've never seen from a makeup perspective. Like, there are things that I've seen before, but the way that they're approached in this. There are 2 things that involve people's faces, and there is one thing that involves a person's body. That's all I'll say. Those 3 things in particular, I was just like, wow. Like, huge props to whoever was doing that stuff, because it was phenomenal. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think you get more good from this movie than you do bad. And if you're a Halloween fan, I think you should be able to enjoy it, because there are wonderful, you know, nods and tie-ins to the original movie. And there are wonderful similarities between this and Halloween 2. And that was something I loved with the last one, was how, you know, there were similarities, but slight differences. And you get the same kind of vibe here, where you're able to visit and see things that kind of are familiar. And like I said, the tie-in stuff I thought was just so well done. I mean, from a visual standpoint with what was behind the camera, to, you know, everything that you're actually seeing, like, who, you know, going into costume design and set design and the characters that they give us, And there's one thing that blew my mind where I was like, I don't know if that's just an actor, I don't know if that's visual effects, but I swear what I just saw can't possibly be what I just saw, but it looks exactly what I think I just saw. There's some cool stuff in this movie. So let's get the C-Maniacs up and give it a score. Right there they are. Again, I think Michael Myers is very strong. He's the best thing in the movie. He is brutal. He is intimidating. He is terrifying. But the movie isn't actually that scary. I think conceptually the idea of getting the town more involved and seeing their response to what's going on was really cool. And I like a lot of the stuff they did. But somewhere in the middle in that second act, little too much of a broken kind of perspective where we're shifting all over the place, not in a way that felt jumbled or confusing, but just you're divvying up your opposite of Michael to where there's no one solid person where you can say, yeah, you had Michael and you had, this. And that, I think, kind of hurts this movie a little bit, as does just the lack of Laurie Strode, and honestly, the lack of Andi Matichak. I wanted to see more from her, and I even, as much as we got with Judy Greer, and I loved what she gave us, I wanted more with her, too. So some of that you have to sacrifice for the town. But overall, I think conceptually it works. I think it's a good second movie here in this trilogy, and I think it does continue the story in a way that works, I think, well. And I like, the similarities and the things that you see between the old movies and these movies. And I think it starts very, very strong, and it ends very, very strong. And anytime you see a movie, the last thing you think about is the last thing you see, and usually the first thing you see. And those are the two things that pop the most in my head. So for the C-Man, I'm going to go 3.5 out of 5 C-Maniacs. Not perfect, but definitely really, really rock solid. I enjoyed this one, and like I said, second time around, I enjoyed it more, and I'm sure the third and fourth time I watch this at some point, I'll get more into it. And I think watching all three, like the original Halloween, 2018's Halloween, and this, I think it'll be a real good flow. So those are all my non-spoiler thoughts. I hope I didn't give too much away for you guys, but I do just appreciate so much, especially from the filmmaking and the writing standpoints and some of the things that they do. I can't help myself, But that's it. That's everything I got. So now I want to know what you're thinking. Have you seen Halloween Kills yet? If you saw it, what did you think? Did it play well for you? Did you think this was a good follow-up to the first one? Does it match tonally? Did you like what they did story-wise involving the town? Did you wish there was less of that and more of the characters that you're coming to the movie particularly to see or be more invested in? How did you think the beginning and end matched up compared to the middle? And what'd you think of Mike? I mean, come on. If there's one thing that they definitely are nailing in this series, it's this guy. So I would love to know all your thoughts there. If you haven't seen the movie, is it on your Spooktober list? When are you going to go see it? What are you going to see it in? I would suggest something like Dolby or IMAX if you're going to see it in a theater. If you're going to watch it on Peacock, I would love to know that too. Set it up on your couch. I think this will play on a television just fine. Although movie experience always, for me, trumps the TV. But if you're going to watch it, let me know where, how, when, and what you're looking forward to. And if you weren't thinking about it, do we entice you? Do you want to see this movie? Are you a horror fan? Do you want to go down the realm of some Michael Myers killing? Anything you got, good, bad, indifferent, on Halloween Kills goes down below in the comments section. Look forward to talking to you guys down there. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you do, you want to come hang out with the C-Man the whole rest of Spooktober, you just dig when we're talking movies, TV, trailers. I just saw The Last Duel also. Phenomenal. If you want to be here for when I talk about that, you haven't, you want to show a little love support to this guy, well, hey, you can do all those things by joining C-Maniac Nation simply by jumping over there, hitting that subscribe button, hit that little bell if you want those alerts, and until next time, for the C-Man's Cinema, sit down. I've been the C-Man. I'm signing off. Peace. Oh, hey, what's going on? You must be sticking around because you're looking for more content featuring this guy. Well, guess what? You're in the right place. You can check out more videos right here and right here. And if you have and you want to come join that C-Maniac Nation, you can hit that subscribe right over there.